Hey everyone, looks like we're live here. Welcome to the Training Cafe. Grab a cup of coffee. Let's have a bit of a chat. We'll talk goals and systems and climbing and training for the new year, and we'll have a bit of a chat. We'll sip some coffee along the way. Systems and climbing and somehow for the new year, and we'll have a bit of a chat. We'll sip some coffee along the way. Systems and climbing and somehow give me a second here while I sort things out here. Some technical difficulties. Not sure why I'm getting feedback here. See if I can just cancel out of whatever was producing feedback. This is a live production. Hopefully you can hear me. Sorry about that. So it's Monday, January 4th. Happy New Year, everybody. And thanks for stopping by the Training Cafe. This is a live coaching show I do a couple times a month. I actually did one last Monday, and I left you with a little bit of a homework assignment, and that was to think about and perhaps set one or two big goals, something you really want to achieve or do, or go someplace you want to go, or some new life initiative you want to ramp up. Whatever it is, that's the starting point for having your best year ever. And so in this episode, I'm going to talk a little bit more about how to get there, because it's easy to set goals. It's a lot more difficult to achieve the goals. And there's a lot of things that can steal your focus and your time and your attention and prevent you from getting to where you really want to get at. And, we only have one life to live. Here's to trying to make the most of every day, every minute of every day that we have here on this third rock from the sun. And hopefully it includes a lot of climbing on this third rock from the sun. So that's the stuff of this episode. I have about 8 or 10 leftover questions from the last Training Cafe that I didn't get to. And then I see a bunch of questions that have been typed in here in the last few minutes. So I want to get to those as well. And, pack as much as we can here into the next 45 minutes or so. So hopefully this live stream is working here. I had a bit of an issue getting started with the Wi-Fi and some feedback on my laptop, but I hope we have a good quality signal now. And let's get rolling. So it is the new year, and most everybody I know likes to set a goal in the new year, kind of get that fresh start that turning the calendar page kind of allows us to do, and set some new goals and maybe redirect or even perhaps reinvent yourself a little bit. And the new year is a great time to do that. And when it comes to training for climbing, it's a good time to kind of think about course correcting as well, because, I'm really fond of the idea that, to climb at a higher level, or for that matter, to achieve at a higher level in our lives, you can't just continue on this year with what you were doing last year. And so something as simple as, mixing up and refining your training program for climbing, when you integrate that over days and weeks and then months of this new year, it can make a massive difference in your results, and hopefully when you're out climbing. And same thing goes in our personal lives, whether it's school or career or relationships. If you stay operating day after day in the same mode that you did, continuing on in a stale relationship that's just not working out, or a job that you hate, or maybe in school, a course of study that just, you're not into or isn't right for you anymore. The new year's a great time to kind of plan and commit to a new course. And by, making that change now, though it may be difficult, If it involves getting out of a relationship or changing majors in college or changing careers, moving to a different city, those are all pretty big things. But, instead of being miserable or heading down a path that you've determined isn't right for you, the New Year is a great time to make a plan to course correct. And that gets to, I guess, kind of the key idea is that, people are good at thinking about what they want and, setting goals and bucket lists and things like that. But until you write them down on paper and until you kind of plan a course, nothing's going to happen. It's like standing at the base of the route and saying, boy, I'd like to get to the anchors. It would be great to send this beautiful route. But if that's the end of it, then of course it's never going to happen. But if you start visualizing the sequence and thinking, how do I get from here to here to here? And maybe start to work on the sequence, start to train for the project, take action, meaningful action. That's when the progress begins. And so a lot of people set goals, or let's just call them dreams, because if you're not taking action, it's not really a meaningful goal. It's just a wish list, a dream. It's coming up with a system to get there and then executing the game plan. That is the key. And so I am, an older guy and, grew up before computers were everywhere. And so I'm still a pencil and paper guy. I live with a spiral notebook. I have a few of them. I have one that has just my training notes in it. And I have years and years of these notebooks so that I can look back and reflect and see what worked and what didn't. A written record's a beautiful thing to be able to page through. And also every day to take notes and have a written to-do list. Now, you can do the same type of thing on your phone. And if you are an electronically wired person, that if your life revolves around your phone and computer, well, then maybe a pencil and paper is an antiquated way to plot your course. Though I still think there's value in the pencil and paper or the pen and paper approach, because this thing, as amazing as it is, such a wonderful tool to connect us to the world and to potentially improve our productivity in various activities, is also, this thing is kryptonite for a lot of people, because it's dinging and flashing and, oh my gosh, a new text, a new Facebook, a new Instagram post. And it creates a sense of urgency. And many people's brains, get wired. You get that little dopamine hit when you go in and see your new likes or your new comments. And it literally becomes an addiction, a distraction that, if you need to look at your phone every 15 minutes, if you need to go to Instagram every 30 minutes to see what's new, you are not going to reach any meaningful goals in your life. Name a really successful person, Elon Musk, or a top professional athlete. They may dabble in social media, and they certainly have a phone they use as a tool, but they're not, spending hours a day on this thing, scrolling through social media and seeing what other people are doing. They are doing themselves. And so that's something that, I'm susceptible to, even as, someone that didn't grow up in a wired, daily life. I'm susceptible as anybody to wanting to look at social media. So I turn off all notifications. The only time I get a ding on my phone pretty much is a text message, because if I'm getting a text, I feel like maybe it could be something important that I need to deal with. But social media is not important. And so, you can once a day, twice a day, have 15 minutes where you catch up on what your friends are doing and what you need to do on social media. But if you're spending more than that, then I would propose you're not living effectively and you're not acting in ways that are going to get you rapid progress towards your goal. When you put the phone away, or for some people, it's the television set, turn it off and get deeply focused on whatever the activity is, training, studying, working, career-related stuff. When you really get focused, get in the zone on an activity the way you do when you're on a route. That is when things happen quickly. And when I get in that mode, I can get more done in a few hours than, probably some people get done in a few days or a few weeks because of distractions. And you can do the same thing. If you wake up each morning, as I do, and have kind of a to-do list, and I can hit the ground, brew up my first cup of coffee and hit the ground running and start making progress. And that includes having the time blocked out to get my climbing workouts in, which I guess is what we should circle back to here. But, I like to think about, not just climbing performance, but human performance. And hopefully that's something you value that I, talk about sometimes, whether it's in my podcasts or my books or here in Training Café, is, climbing is a big part of all of our lives, but yet, I'm also a believer that there are other things that bring value to our lives, family and friends and other activities. And so why not try to not just train for peak climbing performance, but train for peak life performance? Do the best you can do. And I think each of us is capable of more greatness than you might expect. And I'm a big fan of, believing that you can do great things. But again, to turn that dream or that belief into action is where a lot of people fail. And so that just takes, developing discipline and a system. And for me, the system is I have a notebook and I write down a to-do list every night and I hit the ground running the next day on that to-do list. You could do it on your phone or, find other ways to do it, but you need to stay on course. And then you need to recognize when you drift off course. And again, this seems to be the focal point of why a lot of people fall off course in their life, or even just in the gym when I see people, okay, you're taking a 3-minute rest between an exercise. Why not jump on your phone and look at Instagram for a few minutes? But the problem is 3 minutes can turn into 5 minutes, turn into 10 minutes, and you're not training effectively. So I'd rather just put a timer on my phone and use the rest break to do a different exercise, a set of core in between my hangboard sets. And so as soon as you open the door to the phone getting involved in an important task, you kind of, risk that you're going to get pulled off course and not act effectively and not get as much done in a block of time, whether it's a 1-hour workout or a 1-hour period of study. So really try to become a system person. Put in place standard operating procedure for your climbing workouts, for your studying. If you're a student, get the phone the heck out of where you're studying. Close all the web browsers and just think deeply into the topic at hand, and you will get done. Get more done in 1 hour than most people get done in many hours. It's just that simple matter of being able to create focus, and the biggest step to creating focus is eliminating distractions. And I guess my final point before I move on to some training questions here is I feel like one thing, I don't know, it's probably 20 years ago that it dawned on me that the best way to get results in my life, in whatever activity I'm involved in, or to hopefully positively influence other people like you, or the readers of my book, or the listeners on my podcast, is to focus on impact. How can I create the most impact with the minutes of my life? And if I have created a positive impact on other individuals, well, that's a beautiful thing to be able to contribute in that way. And we each can, in our own way, without a doubt, have a positive impact on other people. And then, of course, have an impact on those around us. In my case, my wife, my kids, my family members, and also my clients and my climbing partners. If I'm able to have a positive impact on them, then I've lived my days well. And what more could we do? That's more important than financial wealth. That is for sure, is to have an impact. So if you can wake up each day and ask yourself, how can I have the most impact on making progress towards my goals? That would be your first step. But then also at the same time, what can I do today to have impact on other people? And so that's, especially as I get older, really becoming the biggest focus of my life, because my kids are moving out of the house. So why not reach out via Training Café, or through my new company, Fizzy Vantage, which I formed to have an impact, to help people train more effectively and get better results in their training and their climbing. And so if you're trying to have a positive impact, then Coach Hörst says you're doing a great job with how you live your life. And so with that, again, look at each day as kind of just like each new year, we kind of take a fresh start. Well, why not just have that same approach to each new day? And if you're going through the same motions and the same stale routines and around the same stale people as you were yesterday or last year, then not much is going to change going forward. Okay, so enough with that little Tony Robbins talk, or whatever you want to consider it. Hopefully you enjoy that kind of stuff from time to time. Okay, let's blow through some training questions here. And there's a diverse array of questions that have been getting typed in. And let me first get to a few questions that were submitted last time and I didn't get to. And now Yuri, I see, has typed in the questions he left last time. He was wondering about, I've talked in podcasts about the specific ways we train in our house, in our home gym. I have two sons who are real hard climbers, and I'm still climbing fairly hard for my age later into life. And as a coach and a climbing researcher, I'd like to think that we're training as effectively as anybody on the planet is, because we are tapping into, the latest research, and I'm kind of trying to unlock the keys to more effective training. That's why you're here in Training Café, is to get some of those clues and some of that information. And one of the big things I've talked about in recent years is the concept of energy system training. And with regard to the three bioenergetic systems that supply ATP to our muscles, that power our movements, that allow us to be alive right now, we are splitting ATP. And in any case, the approach that we use, especially during our off-season training, is what I call a polarized approach to training. So our focus during our winter training block, when we're not, heading on a trip imminently, is to train maximum strength and power. So that's the one end of the spectrum. And then the polarized, idea is that we train aerobic power, which is the other end of the spectrum. And both of those are adaptations that can be slowly improved year over year for a long time, because although you can get a little bump in maximum strength and power and aerobic power when you begin a new program, you'll get a little bump. But that long, slow increase in maximum strength and that long, slow increase in aerobic power, they're completely different adaptations, but they can, with proper training, be elevated year over year for quite a long time, potentially decades. And so that forms the basis for, physiologically growing your capabilities and your capacity to climb hard routes year over year. And that third energy system that sits in the middle, that's kind of a bridge between your maximum strength and power and your aerobic power, that middle zone is anaerobic endurance, anaerobic glycolysis, which is the least trainable energy system. Now, it's very important for climbing because, we operate, climbing is a power endurance sport, a strength endurance sport. And when we get pumped out and fail on a hard boulder or crux move, it seems that it's our power endurance which is lacking. And so we do need to address that energy system, but the novel adaptations for that anaerobic, that lactic energy system, the novel adaptations are very small. They just relate to anaerobic enzymes and buffering and lactate transporters. And those are all things you can get spun up with about a 2 to 4 week block of power endurance training. So if you spend all year training power endurance, you're wasting your time. And you're actually, ensuring that you won't progress year over year. You will get pumped, you will get fatigued, you'll feel like you're having great workouts because when you train power endurance, you're always pumped out. And you always leave the gym really, potentially exhausted, but you're not training effectively if that's how you train year round. And a lot of climbers make that mistake. I did a long time ago before I understood the science, because it seems like instinctively that's what you need to do to improve as a climber. But it's the least trainable energy system. And so all you need to do is a 2 to 4 week block of power endurance training right before competition or right before your trip or right before your outdoor climbing performance season. Do the polarized training for a month or two, and then a few weeks of power endurance, and you'll have all three energy systems elevated for your competition or outdoor performance season. But again, to improve long-term, it's the polarized training, which I think is going to, for most people, help you continue on that upward slope of improving your physical capabilities year over year. If you're going to the gym every week, year round, and training power endurance, again, you're going to get pumped and think you're having a good workout, but you're not training effectively, and potentially you are stunting or even stalling your progress. So a long answer, but there's a lot of science to this. And by the way, I'm participating the Performance Climbing Coach organization run by climbstrong.com. There's a virtual conference or summit, about a dozen speakers. I am one of them, presenting later in January. If you just Google Climb Strong or Performance Climbing Coach, you can learn more about this, and you will be able to view kind of on demand later this month these presentations. And mine is 2 very intense hours on energy system training where we really drill down deeply. So if you're really into learning the science and actually benefiting from all the experts that are participating in PCC, then you should check out that event. Okay, on to a few questions here. Let me blow through some of these more quickly, since they hopefully are less technical than that last question. last time Dana asked me about my sauna use. I think sauna is a great recovery tool. It feels good to go in there, and I have an infrared sauna, so it penetrates into the muscles, enhances blood flow, and post-workout circulation is a good thing. It's kind of the opposite of jumping in an ice bath, which is kind of in vogue right now, but you would only really want to do that in a case that you've really severely hurt yourself, you just played a tackle football game. You probably want to get in an ice bath. Or you just came down 2 days, 3 days off a big wall. Jumping in an ice bath might not be a bad thing. But as a post-workout intervention done regularly, the ice bath actually suppresses adaptations. It's not a good thing. Just like taking tons of ibuprofen every day chronically to suppress inflammation, you are actually suppressing some of the signals for adaptation. So that's not a good thing either. But a sauna used post-workout can be a good thing. And even on rest days, which is when I tend to use it most, to get that circulation up in the muscles and to also have some positive effects on the cardiovascular system. Your heart rate, picks up when you're in a sauna. And there's even something called heat shock proteins that your body will make when you kind of bake yourself in a sauna. And that's a useful kind of stimulus that can enhance athletic performance as well. But does every climber need to use a sauna? No, but it's just something that if you have access to an infrared sauna, it might be something you want to use a couple of days a week. It can have some useful benefits to it. Question about hangboard training and skin wear. I guess this person left a question saying they hangboard train 4 days a week, probably using a couple of different protocols, but that their skin breaks down quickly. And that makes me think maybe the hangboard you're using is just too sharp. Like it's a plastic board with a lot of texture. If that's the case, sand down the texture. I have a bunch of hangboards, like more than a dozen hangboards in our home gym here that I've collected over the years. And I use them all to some degree, but all the plastic boards that came with a lot of texture, I've sanded it down so that it's not texture free, but it reduces the wind tear or the skin wear. And we also have some wood boards. I love the Beastmaker board. I use that a lot because that tends to not cause any skin wear. Though if you're a real sweaty person, then maybe you need more texture. So skin wear shouldn't be a limiting factor in training. Outdoor climbing, of course, it can be and often is. And that's where you have to learn to use tape to your benefit to kind of put it in the wear points or cracking points. If you can learn to dial in tape use and also just general skincare practices, which is beyond the scope of this question. But those are all things that as you train harder and climb more often, it becomes a factor. And I'll tell you, some of the top pros who deal with skin wear because they're always grabbing small, sharp holds really have told me that the use of our Supercharged Collagen on a daily basis has been beneficial. Drew Ruana said it was game-changing for him in his hard bouldering to do the daily Supercharged Collagen because our skin is made up of collagen. And so your body needs to synthesize collagen not only to remodel connective tissues, tendons, ligaments, and such, but also to, you need the glycine and the proline that is in a very high concentration in Supercharged Collagen supports skin regeneration. And while I don't personally notice the difference in my skin, some climbers do. We're all different, human beings, of course, with slightly different genetics. And, so some of us react a little differently. I mean, I have very dry skin, so I don't have as much of an issue with skin wear, though I do have some issues with cracking. And that's more of just a moisture issue for me. But that's another story. Question about... question about best training program for the Red River Gorge. Well, if you're planning to go to the Red, say 3 or 4 months from now, well, then I would do the polarized training. Train up your strength and power, train up your aerobic endurance, put in, 3 workouts a week for each of those. So that's lactic training for the strength and power, and, threshold climbing training, to get right in that sweet spot for maximally training the aerobic energy system. That should be the bulk of your training until a month before your trip. And then you start to add in that power endurance training to spin up those novel adaptations that will help you persevere when you're pumped. And even throwing some blood flow restriction training into the mix that last month could potentially be beneficial. So again, if I was doing a 12-week program leading up to a Red River Gorge trip, I would do 8 weeks of that polarized training with very little power endurance training, maybe once a week if you wanted to do it. And then the last 3 weeks, let's say 4 weeks at the most, do the power endurance training 3 days a week, and just do 1 or 2 sessions for strength and power and aerobic power to maintain as you head into your trip. And then, of course, a training taper is always prudent if you're going on a trip or heading into competition. Let me see here. Austin was wondering when he should progress from 2-handed hangboard training to training 1-armed. And yeah, that's a really good question. For max, strength training, you're just doing brief, high intensity hangs. And so for me, after a thorough warm up, I'm doing hangs with oftentimes about 80 pounds of weight, free weight plates on a loading pin hanging from the belay loop of my harness. So I weigh 160 pounds, and I'm adding about half of my body weight to the loading pin. When I'm peaking, I'm sometimes up to adding 100 pounds onto the loading pin. So I'm maybe more like at 60 or 65% of my body weight added. And it's right in that ballpark that you should start thinking about transitioning into doing some one-handed hangboard training. I'm just at the cusp of that, with my training. If you're able to do 7 to 10 second hangs with about half of your body weight added to your harness, that as a good rule of thumb could be a time to start switching to one-handed training. You likely won't be able to hold your whole body weight with one hand yet. So you'll want to set up a counterweight system. Just, anchor a pulley to the ceiling and run a 5 millimeter piece of cord up over the pulley, and then attach some weights to it, 10, 15, 20 pounds to it, and pull the counterweight cord while you're hanging with the one hand. And that takes you into a more elite level training program when you're training one-handed. Again, that's not something to rush into because, it's more stressful on your shoulder. You need to be able to keep your scapula in proper position. And so I would think you'd want to do a few years of two-handed training, be involved in a really solid training program for, your rotator cuff and your scapular stabilizers. And if you have, 2 or 3 years of high quality training under your belt and you're injury free with regard to your shoulders and elbows, then you might be ready to start transitioning into one-handed training. And that's almost exclusively how my sons train because they are that strong. And for me, I'm kind of right on the cusp, but I still do mainly two-handed training. I think it's more forgiving. You can train with better technique. And I don't want to do anything to tempt injury. So I avoid, exercises that are kind of, at least at my age, things that have potential to cause injury. And whenever you're doing kind of one-arm type training activities, that is a bit scary for an older climber. And so training carefully, and always remembering the number one rule of Eric's Train Club, which is don't get injured. So, if you get injured climbing, that happens sometimes. But you should never get injured training. That's, big mistake. Okay, I think just a couple more here, and then I can get to what's been typed in here today. A question from Tracy about a deload week in the middle of a training cycle. If you're in a big training block, like an 8 or 12-week training block, absolutely. If you feel the fatigue accumulating after, say, 5 weeks, where you're not recovered, you're heading down for your workout and you're still sore from the previous workout, or you notice on your max hangs your numbers are dropping instead of going up, those are all signs that you're kind of overreaching a little bit, and doing a deload week mid-cycle, taking a couple of days off, or reducing your training volume by 50% for 1 week. Those would all be effective ways to respond smartly, as opposed to you're in the middle of a training block and you're training, sore. Maybe you start to have some, a little bit of achiness in your fingers, signs that, the collagen synthesis is falling behind in your pulleys, and that type of thing. You train through, without paying attention or adjusting things, it can lead to a worse injury, and overtraining, and can ultimately be a big setback. And, again, that gets back to where we started this training cafe, is to reach those distant goals, to stay on a slope upward, making steady progress. You need a system, you need a standard operating procedure, and you need to be able to kind of react to feedback real time. And, so you have a little bit of an achiness in your finger, slapping a little tape on and just forging ahead is not the prudent thing necessarily. Maybe you want to, take a week off from the hangboarding, and just do some aerobic training on big holds, or even just take a few days off and assess, does the pain go away? Consume more protein in your diet. All those things can help address that little ache so that it doesn't escalate into something worse. Another question about golfer's elbow. Golfer's elbow is medial epicondylitis. It's also called climber's elbow. There's also lateral epicondylitis, which is often called tennis elbow. And there are other injuries that can occur around your elbow that can mimic tendinitis or tendinosis. There is a nerve that runs underneath the epicondyle. There can be some entrapment there. There are, your triceps tendon. There are a number of things that can evoke pain in your elbow. So the first thing is to identify what is causing the pain in the elbow. If it really is medial epicondylitis, like that classic climber's elbow, pull-ups are what hurt it the most. Stop doing pull-ups. Don't do things that provoke the injury. That's number one, is eliminate all pull-ups from your training for a period of time. And just making that adjustment, it may quiet down over the course of a few weeks. Now, if it's really become a persistent problem, a true tendinosis, which has failed healing over the course of many months, that's a tougher injury to deal with. And in the old school days, they would give you a shot of cortisone, which in most cases is not the best thing to do. It can do more harm than good. What is better these days is to have some very appropriate loading of the tendon. Dr. Tyler Nelson out of Salt Lake City is really knowledgeable in this area, and you could engage him for a consult, and he could give you specific exercises. Pretty much when you have failed healing of a tendon, you need to load the tendon for an extended period of time. So like 30 to 60 second isometric contractions are important to get the loading into the disorganized tissue and get the tenocytes to respond and turn on and extrude collagen to remodel in an appropriate way and to get things aligned and to strengthen. And so committing to frequent appropriate loading, not doing the things that provoke it, but instead doing specific isometric type exercises or slow eccentric exercises, pretty high load, but long in duration, because you need to get that stress into the connective tissues and have it sustained for 30 to 60 seconds to get the signal to the damaged tissue. And so if you think of, if there's a spot of damaged collagen in your tendon, if you think of a rock in the middle of a river and how the water passes around the rock. Well, when you apply force quickly to tendons, that's how the force deviates around the damaged tissue. So if you're climbing and pulling quickly, or campusing, or any typical sports activity, which is powerful and quick and repeated, the force is passing around the damaged area. That's called stress shielding. And you will never get healing in that modus operandi. That's why you need to reduce the sport-specific loading that is quick. And you need to go to the other end of the spectrum, which is the slow eccentric or the sustained isometric for 30 or 60 seconds. And instead of the force passing through the tendon, like the river analogy again, around the rock, when you have an isometric or eccentric contraction that is longer in duration, that stress shielding relaxes. It's called stress relaxation, and you can actually get the force to begin to pass through the damaged area, which then gives the tenocytes there, which are the fibroblasts that will extrude new collagen and align it properly, and you begin the healing process. And that's why you can't just do your sport and get through an injury in many situations. You need to take countermeasures. It's called rehab. Now, it needs to be the right rehab, and that involves isometric and eccentric contractions that are long in duration. That is the key, because that gets you that stress relaxation and gets the force to go through the damaged portion of the tendon. So there's a little bit of a medical overview. And again, Tyler Nelson could really hone that in even more for you, because after all, he's the doctor and I am not. Okay, Amanda left this message at the end of the last training Café. She is seeking to do her first 512 by age 40, which is just 10 months away. How should she train? Specifically, she's asking about weightlifting, like squatting and deadlifting, how often she should do that. And to be honest, the deadlifting and the squats, while I'm not opposed to doing a little bit of weight training, especially for female climbers, weight training, especially upper body weight training, can be a really helpful thing. The deadlifting, squatting isn't going to be a huge difference maker in getting you to 512 in the next 10 months. What's going to make the difference is your climbing, being on a regular climbing schedule, 2, 3, 4 days a week, whether it's in a climbing gym or outside or a combination of both. Doing some hard bouldering, getting more accustomed to doing harder moves. If you want to do your first 12A, if you can get to the point where you can boulder V4, V5 with a few tries, well, you're right at the cusp of 12A type moves or 12B moves at V4, V5. And then if you can do that on a bouldering wall and then transition that into roped climbing, you will reach your goal. And so I would think more about the climbing specific training the next 10 months. And while you might do a little bit of weight training on the side, don't view that as your major pathway to gains, because weight training alone isn't going to do it. Okay, so that covers the questions that were submitted in the last Training Cafe last Monday. So let me just scroll here and see what we have. Jammer RO, what is the basic difference between Fizzy Vantage collagen and the other collagens on the market? And there are a lot of collagen peptide supplements out there. It's become a really hot category in the sports nutrition area. And the Supercharged Collagen that I designed from scratch and have manufactured is totally unique from anything else on the market. It's based on the research of Keith Barr at UC Davis, where he did all the studies on the tendons and ligaments and what you can do to encourage and support and hopefully accelerate collagen synthesis in terms of healing injuries or just training and getting your connective tissues stronger. And there's a very specific protocol that you can find on the Fizzy Vantage website for how to couple the collagen with training, because the two should be dovetailed together. And that's how you get the optimal effects. And our product, unlike the others on the market, is enriched with vitamin C, which is essential for collagen synthesis. It's enhanced with leucine, which is an important amino acid for turning on protein synthesis in our bodies. And we have a little bit of tryptophan added to it to make it a complete spectrum a complete spectrum protein. So not only is our supercharged collagen great for supporting collagen synthesis in the body, in our connective tissues, but it is also effective at supporting collagen and muscle protein synthesis post-workout. It is a very complete supplement, and it's massively different from the generic collagens that are sold. Like if you go onto Amazon, you'll find 100 or more, which are just generic collagens that are not enriched or enhanced in any way. They're not even complete protein products. So they have, a nutritionist would tell you, zero nutritional value since they're not a complete protein. You don't know where they come from, who manufactured it. It could be sourced from China for all you know. And so you basically get what you pay for in many cases. And certainly in sports nutrition, you want to get a premium grade product, which of course Fizzy Vantage is. Question here, good exercise for rehab of tendinitis. Okay, I just covered that the last 10 minutes in extensive fashion, but it's slow eccentric or isometric contractions that are held for a fairly long duration. At the end of a 3-2-1 cycle, is it okay to do a max strength and power workout right before the deload week? Yeah, absolutely. And even when you're doing those dedicated blocks, like my polarized training concept, the one energy system you're not training, you can still do one per week if it makes you feel good. It is arguably a good thing to do, just to keep all energy systems up. Even though it may be your off season and you're doing a training block, maybe there'll be a day where you'll get outside and climb, or maybe there'll be a competition you want to go to. And so to do at minimum one workout per week for each energy system year round, I think that's a great idea. But to really make gains, you need to do some targeted training. And that's where I think during your off season, you want to use that polarized training approach. Most people, true beginners, need to focus on climbing and not getting into the weeds of energy system training, that's for sure. So if you're in your first year of climbing, then TMI, don't worry about the energy system training. But if you're more advanced, someone who's been in the sport for several years, maybe someone who's reached a plateau in ability, energy system training is potentially a big deal, a game changer for you. Okay, let's see here. Question, is it ideal to train both power and power endurance on the same day for an intermediate climber? 7A is around 11 plus in the Yosemite decimal scale. So a pure power exercise or max strength power exercise is something brief and maximally intense, like weighted hangs or campus board training, exercises that last less than 10 seconds that really target that alactic energy system. Power endurance is training that's high power, not maximal, but high power, maybe 80% of max, that you do that lasts you 20 seconds to maybe a minute. And those are the types of exercises that really pump you out and call that lactic system into play. You get acidity, you get pumped, it's painful, it's grueling. It's gratifying because you feel like when you're training that lactic system, like you're getting a heck of a workout. But again, that's the least trainable energy system. Back to the question, can you train the power and the power endurance in the same workout? You could. I mean, I would rather split them and do max strength and power in the morning for a 90-minute session where you're doing your weighted hangs and your campusing, and then have a 4 to 6 or 7 hour break and then do the power endurance in the evening. That might be bouldering 4x4s, things like that. That would be ideal because the whole idea of energy system training is to target one energy system per workout. It elicits a specific signal that then triggers the body to adapt in ways that will make you better. So if you just do the alactic training, the max strength and power, and let that signal play out for 4 to 6 hours, and then later in the day or the next day, do your power endurance session, that then triggers a unique signal for adaptation. That is the ideal way to do it. The shotgun approach of going to the gym and doing a little bit of everything or a lot of everything, not an effective way to train in the long term. Okay. Oh, thanks, Neil. Okay. Question about weighted hangs. At what percent of body weight would you suggest moving to a smaller edge from 20 millimeter, or at what point would it be beneficial to start one arm hangs? Okay, well, I kind of talked about this a bit earlier. I like for weighted hangs that something right around a 20 millimeter edge is a good size for most people. It's a little less than one pad. It's not so small that it tends to be a super sharp edge, but it's not so big that it gets to near that DIP joint. You want to, again, be somewhere around 3/4 of the first pad. So for most people, 18, 20, maybe at most 22 millimeters is a good size edge. Keep adding weight until you get up to half your body weight added, and then consider going to the one-handed training with the counterweight system. And eventually, when you're strong enough, no counterweight system. In fact, my sons train with added weight in the free hand. They do one arm hangs on a 20 millimeter edge and hold a 10, 20, 30, 40 pound dumbbell, which is, that's world-class strength, something that most climbers aren't at yet, but potentially can get to if you have, proper training for many years and good coaching and, perhaps some genetic factors lining up for you. Now, one more thing, I do think there's value in doing some minimum edge training. We have the Ava Lopez transgression board, which goes all the way down to 6 millimeter edges. Now, it's painful training. You can't do a lot of it, but we all dabble on that 6 millimeter edge from time to time. A body weight hang on 6 millimeter edge is kind of, it's the same as it has a similar effect as the max weight hangboard training. You have to hang on really hard, try really hard, and tolerate the pain of the small edge to some degree is also a factor. And if you do too much of it, you might end up ripping your tips, so it's hard on the skin. So it's not good as your go-to training to constantly be doing that minimum edge training, but there is value. There is adaptation, this fleshy tip of your skin called pulp. Everybody's a little bit different, but the amount of pulp that you have there has some influence. There's research that shows, the pulp is what deforms over sharp little small climbing holds. And so if you have bony fingertips, it's tougher to hang on small holds. If you have more pulpy tips, it's actually easier to hang on smaller holds. And so by training on small holds, there may be some fleshy adaptations that come about that will make you better at small holds. So I do think maybe 80 to 90% of your training should be on a more comfortable hold, but maybe 10 to 20% on a minimum edge would be a prudent thing for a more advanced climber. So there's a little tip for you. What do you think about working out early morning and climbing later? Yeah, I'm a big fan of that because I like the split workouts and I'm a morning person. And, if you're someone that's out of bed early and has a busy day, it can be very time effective to get something in at home early in the day and then maybe go to a commercial gym late in the day. Or you could do some aerobic training early in the day. My only concern with doing morning strength training is that, our bodies operate, as a circadian rhythm. And, many studies have shown that we are just, we are stronger and more powerful in the afternoon than we are in the morning. So if you really want to train at your maximum, like do your best campus board workout possible, it's going to be easier to do it 4 p.m. or 6 p.m. than at 4 or 6 a.m. That's just how our bodies and brains work. Now, that's not to say you couldn't get a good warm up in the morning and have a pretty good workout. And I will often do a strength power workout around 9 or 10 a.m., if I'm doing a split workout. But I do think it's better done in the afternoon or evening. So I think if you're doing split workouts, you're doing an advanced training protocol, and you probably have a good sense already of how your body reacts to training and what you're capable of. Some people are miserable trying to get out of bed in the morning and do a workout, or they just can't get themselves out of bed on time to even do it, if you're not a morning person. And so you might need to find that person might need to find a different way to do it. But for those who are, morning people that kind of can get up early, I'm often pretty much every day up before the sun rises and start my day. I like the idea of doing some kind of a morning workout just to get your heart rate up, to get blood moving around. And then, kind of sets me off on a good way, for the day. And then I can sit down and do my brain power work. And have that hopefully done by 2 or 3 in the afternoon, and then kind of my busy work and my main climbing workout late in the day. So experiment and find out what works best for you. I guess that's kind of the bottom line. Okay, boulder fighters. Hey, Eric, which exercises can you recommend for getting stronger on slopers? Not including bouldering on them, because that would be the easy answer. It would be to boulder on slopers. And yeah, there are a few devices out there, holding slopers, wrist stabilizer strength. That's kind of the unsung hero in a lot of grips that people don't realize. The strength of your wrist extensors and your wrist flexors is quite important. There's a research study where they measured finger force on big holds and then going down to incrementally smaller holds. And I believe they did EMG study with it as well. And they found, as you go to smaller holds or more slopey holds, your wrist begins to destabilize and, you can't grip as much. And so as climbers, we spend so much time doing weighted hangs and all this stuff to get our finger flexors stronger, but we overlook the role of the forearm muscles that actually hold our wrist stable in different positions, especially when we grab on smaller holds or sloper holds. And so I would say, think more about doing, reverse wrist curls, but also exercises that train kind of open hand wrist extension. There are these devices that, like, with, large diameter pull-up bars that require your wrist flexors to activate while you do pull-ups, or doing wrist rolls, even some blood flow restriction, put straps on your upper arm and do some wrist curls. All of those things, I think, potentially can help you quite a bit in the long term, becoming better on slopers. Now, when it gets to actually applying a sloper grip effectively while you're climbing on a boulder or route, body position is hugely important. Because if your hips out and far away from the wall on that sloper hold, the force vectors are more likely you're going to slip off. But the more you can twist your hips and draw your center of gravity into the wall, especially, when we're talking an overhanging route with a sloper hold, the more you can get your center of gravity into the wall, you actually change the force vectors and you turn that sloper into a more positive hold. And so that's exciting concept when you understand the physics of it, is that on overhanging routes, you can make slopers more positive or less sloping, by getting your center of gravity into the wall. Or you can turn what's a flat hold into an in-cut hold. Same thing, by getting your hips into the wall. And so if you watch a really skilled climber on steep territory, they are turning their hips on almost every move, that it's possible. They are finding a way. I mean, if you watch Adam Ondra, it's like one drop knee and hip turn to the next, to the next, to the next. And by doing that, he's turning the slopers into more positive holds, and he's turning the flat holds into in-cut holds, which therefore means less finger flexion, less wasted energy, more endurance, more strength, more power, more sending. So, we have to be careful not to always get bogged down into the answer to becoming better at climbing is just to train more. It's also to climb more effectively, more efficiently, waste less energy climbing. And that's technical and mental. And so I'm very fond. I've been writing for 25 years about the climbing performance pie, which has 3 pieces: physical, technical, mental. You need to be working on all 3 areas. And, people who love to train like myself, you tend to focus on training and measuring finger force and all this stuff. And it's easy to overlook the other stuff. And your, mental self-sabotage when you're climbing, or your bad or poor or lackluster technique that's causing you to waste energy. So keep an open mind. Keep a beginner's mindset is a key for life. I have pro-level climbers reach out to me because they want to learn new stuff. So, they, as great as they are, still have kind of that curious beginner's mindset. And as long as you can maintain that, you will continue to improve in climbing. When you think you know it all and you're the most badass climber around, then you're probably at the end of the road in terms of becoming a better climber. Okay, I'm at 1 hour, a little bit past, so let me see if I can blow through just a couple more questions, but I want to wrap this up because I got a busy day myself, and probably you do too, you do as well. Okay, so bouldering for the past 6 months and you began to rope climb, what would you do in terms of preparation? Well, if you've been bouldering, you're good at trying hard, which that's nice, but on a route, you need to be able to try hard on a hard move, but then you need to be able to down regulate and relax in between the hard moves. And so boulders who transition to rope climbing tend to be mechanical and tend to not have the fluidity and therefore are very inefficient. So I would climb for volume. I would when you begin rope climbing after a long time away from rope climbing, I would not try to start projecting something right away. You need to do the opposite of that. You need to do a lot of submaximal climbing. Go to the gym, do 8, 10, 12 routes well below your limit. Work on movement skills. Work on that self-regulation of tension, taking your arousal and effort up on a hard move and then dialing it right back when you get through the hard move. That's what great rock climbers are able to do. Whereas hard bouldering, it's like everything's bearing down and squeezing and trying hard, really hard, maximally, maybe for 5 or 10 moves, and then it's over. But you can't do that on a route, obviously. And so I think you need to get your endurance back, yes, and that will come through volume climbing. But the things that will come back most quickly, hopefully, will be those kind of movement skills and the unique mental skills needed for route climbing. So I would climb for volume the first few weeks before you think about trying to push your limits on a rope again. How well transferable is open crimp to half crimp? I got injured. Crimping triggers PIP, joint pain, and swelling. Yeah, to some degree, strength. There are flexor tendons that anchor to, and flex the DIP joint and the PIP joint. And they are both located in the forearm. The flexor digitorum profundus that flexes the DIP joint is a deep flexor. It's deep down in your forearm, whereas the flexor superficialis that flexes the PIP joint is more of a superficial muscle. They work, they contribute at different ratios. There's some good research on this, but I won't get into it. But when you're crimping, like half crimping or full crimping, on that end joint, it's the flexor digitorum profundus that is carrying about 3/4 of the load. And as you shift into open hand gripping, the load becomes more evenly distributed between the two. And so if you have an A2 pulley injury or PIP, joint pain, you want to be climbing open-handed as much as possible. And that will keep both the flexor tendon muscles in decent shape, but it won't be optimal for having that crimp strength. And so the answer to your question is, yeah, it's, doing open crimp or open hand training is better than no training, obviously. And if you can get yourself to climb mostly that way, that could be a good thing too, in terms of reducing injury risk and pain and joint swelling. But there are certain holds that require crimping. And so you do want to slowly return to doing some crimp training. Again, never do closed crimp training with the thumb lock. Always kind of that, half or open crimp would be the way to go, but ease back into it as your condition improves. Any problem with just doing half crimp hangboard training? Again, if you do, I kind of split my time between open hand and like half crimp training. And then when you're climbing, you'll get enough of the more kind of closed, tight crimping motion. I think that's fine if you kind of evenly split there. Yeah, okay, so out of time constraints, is it advisable to combine a hangboard strength workout with an antagonist workout afterwards? Yeah, I don't have any issue with that. If you're doing, a finger flexor hangboard type workout and then doing some push muscles, you're working completely different muscle groups. So I don't think there's an interference there as much. Just like you would do maybe hangboard and core training as part of the same workout. It's doing, max weight hangboarding and then doing route training in the same workout. That would be an energy system conflict. But mixing and matching very dissimilar, hangboard training with some antagonist training or rotator cuff training, that's absolutely fine and actually very smart, because you could, during your rest between hangboard efforts, you could do, a set of rotator cuff training, or you could do some, bench pressing or something like that if you wanted to. Okay, let's see here. Yeah, training to rest ratio is important. And so for, a strength power exercise, you're spending most of your time resting. You're, expending, an all-out effort or darn near all-out effort for 5 or 10 seconds, and then you're resting for 3 minutes. So what's that work-rest ratio? Something in the order of 1 to 20 or so. When you go to power endurance, strength endurance training, that ratio is more like 1 to 4 or 1 to 5. So the 4, if you're going all out for 1 minute or doing a 1 minute set of repeaters, you would be resting 3, 4, 5 minutes between sets. So you're getting incomplete recovery. And that's what's required, and then you keep repeating that depending on your protocol for some time, and you get quite a workout, because each set becomes more and more lactic. And then eventually late in the workout, each set actually becomes a little more aerobic than it is lactic as the lactic system begins to fail you. But, and then as you go to the aerobic training, which you're operating at maybe only 30% of your max force, your critical force is just a fraction of your peak force, but you're climbing or training or doing repeaters or moving hangs for several minutes, 3 to 5 minutes of steady, sustained exercise. Intensity effort might be 6 or 7 or 7.5 out of 10, so you can get a light pump, but not a deep pump. If you're doing like threshold training in that way, it's almost an even work-rest ratio. Like if you're on a tread wall, 2 minutes on, 2 minutes off, 2 minutes on, 2 minutes off, and you just kind of keep that oxidative system brimming right at its limit, maybe slightly dipping into the lactic system, but never going deeply into it. And that is that threshold workout that is so good for mitochondria biogenesis and for developing capillarity and all those oxidative system adaptations that we're after. And so lots of rest at the strength end of the spectrum between exercises. And when you go to the endurance end of the spectrum, it's, a very small work-rest ratio. Okay, question about the supercharged collagen itself has not been externally tested, but the research done by Keith Barr, and there's also a gentleman, and his name is slipping my mind now, out of the Australian Sports Institute, maybe Wells. They have done extensive in vitro and in vivo studies, and athlete case studies with this vitamin C enriched hydrolyzed collagen, and like many studies, so it's not one study, but it's been repeated and getting similar results, how this protocol of coupling vitamin C enriched hydrolyzed collagen with tendon loading, their results were doubles collagen synthesis, or the markers of collagen. You can't measure collagen synthesis directly, but they measure markers that are left in the body of collagen synthesis, and it indicates a doubling. And that is pretty compelling evidence. It's not conclusive, no studies are. And so it does come down to oftentimes what people perceive with regular use. And the results by most hard training athletes are quite compelling. It's anecdotal, obviously. Studies of N equals 1, but when you have hundreds and thousands of athletes, and not just climbers, athletes in many sports, and when you have surgeons now using the vitamin C enriched hydrolyzed collagen post ACL repair, post surgery with professional athletes, it's it works. Will it work for you? Perhaps not, but it does work for most people. Again, if you properly couple the supplement use with the exercise. It's not a magic pill, that is for sure. And anybody who markets it that way is being very deceptive. But the evidence is pretty strong, and it's stronger, far stronger than things that have been done for decades, like getting PRP injections for elbow tendinitis, which is equivocal. It's a shot in the dark, and it most often has no positive effect. And so it's something you'll need to try for yourself. But the studies that have been done over the last 5 years by a couple different institutions are quite impressive, in my opinion. Okay, someone using my training for climbing, finger strength video, both protocols, minimum edge, maximum weight. Yeah, I mean, if you're just getting started, then the key is just to not do too much of it. Climbers, we're enthusiastic individuals. We're passionate about our climbing, and we want to get better so bad, especially, early on. You get that bug, and you're just, you can't wait to get stronger and get better. But and that can lead people down the path of too much training stimulus, and too much hangboard training, too much hard bouldering equals injury very often. And that's why there are so many people walking around with injured fingers, elbows, shoulders. Is you need to know when to say when, and oftentimes less is more when it comes to training. So that's something that is highly individual, and that's where working with a coach, ideally in person, can be quite beneficial to help you get it right. If not, you can learn to be a good, an effective self-coach with some study and being a self-aware person and lots of attention to detail. Yeah, any book suggestions for the new year? One Move Too Many is a great book written by a doctor friend of mine, Volker Schofel, out of Germany. He's arguably the most knowledgeable climbing physician in the world. So he's a good resource for me to have access and someone to climb with, but also his book is really an encyclopedia of climbing injuries. But again, just like the research, on collagen use and research on climbing injuries is evolving. That's why I am so engaged in the climbing research community and with folks like Dr. Schofel, on an international scale, because there's a lot of exciting stuff happening. Even in some remote areas you wouldn't expect it, there's some exciting stuff happening. And so I will continue to bring you that type of information as it's becomes revealed at conferences and or through research papers. How do I improve my climbing technique and efficiency without being able to go to the gym? Yeah, that's tough. If you're on COVID lockdown and your gym is closed, or if you can't climb outside, well, then there's really not a lot you can do. I mean, you could build a small home wall, and that would be good, because you're able to climb. But if you're just stuck in training mode, like with a hangboard and a pull-up bar and whatever, fitness training you can do at home, then it's tough to do much of anything to improve your climbing technique. I mean, I think, things that work on improving flexibility and mobility, daily hip stretching, perhaps some yoga, those things could open the door to, better movement on the rock. But, climbing skill is highly specific. And so there's no, like, for instance, the idea of cross training, like I'm going to go do this sport because it's going to help me do this sport better, doesn't apply to climbing. There's no sport, even, things like walking a slack chain or, things that involve balance like that, you might think would help your climbing, but they really don't, because your balance on a fixed rock is really quite different than balance on a moving chain. And so the idea of cross training, it's not really valid with climbing. You need to climb to get better at climbing skill. I find that I get a head rush from doing the last rep of my pull-up sets. This has never happened. Yeah, good question. I mean, if you're really, when we do max pull-ups or max hangs, you tend to brace, and part of that is holding your breath. And so when you hold your breath, your blood pressure goes up, and then when you let go, it drops down. There could be some hypoxia. So it may have something to do with that. Maybe work on your breathing, trying to breathe with each rep, exhale when you reach the top, and then inhale so that you have, full lungs, and hold your breath only for the movement, and then exhale again. So working on breathing might resolve your problem there. And last question, and then we're going to wrap it up here. Is it possible to make gains while exclusively climbing outdoors for a period of time? Yeah, good question. And I guess, what do you mean by gains? Strength gains? Well, probably not. Climbers tend to lose strength if they're on a long climbing trip. The pro climbers tend to limit their climbing trips to 2 to 4 weeks because they need to get back to the gym to recapture their strength and maybe get the next level. You go on a long trip and you remove all max weight hangboard training and campus training and things like that, you tend to get weaker. Now, your climbing endurance, your aerobic endurance can get better if you're on a long trip, but your max strength tends to come down. Overall, your climbing performance may go up on the trip because you're moving better, you're getting your mental skills dialed in, you're getting more aerobic endurance, but your ability to do single hard moves may be diminishing. And hence, if your project involves a very hard single move or correct sequence, then setting it late in your trip may not happen because you're losing your peak strength. And that's where it might be beneficial to get home, do another training block, and then come back to your project later on. Okay, well, I've been on for an hour and 20 minutes. Boy, time flies here at the cafe. I hope you enjoyed it, where we talk training, sip coffee, and share our passion for climbing. I hope you enjoyed it. I appreciate all the feedback and comments. Probably 2 weeks until we do this again. So mark your calendar down. That would be January 18th. I'll see if I can, I'm going to be traveling a little bit between now and then, but if I'm back in town by the 18th, then we'll be opening up the cafe for business one more time. Until then, Happy New Year, happy training, and build a system for reaching your goals.